today we're going to visit a very secret place in the city. So secret that some of the locals here don't even know about it, but you're gonna know. So this place is called the American German Colony. We're going to do a virtual tour for the next 45 minutes. So I'm here in the American German Colony, virtually, in a sense. What is this place? A very strange place. To understand it even better, we actually need to get outside of it. We're going to get out of the American German Colony virtually and go and stand on the beach next to the Mediterranean. So you see, I'm here at this park. It is called the Charles Klor Park. And behind me, we're overlooking ancient Jaffa. So ancient Jaffa is right over there. Okay. Tel Aviv is over there. So we're in the middle between Tel Aviv and Jaffa, in a sense. You remember that from the previous tour, that Jaffa is a very, very ancient city, so ancient that it is already mentioned in the Bible. But on the other side, Tel Aviv is so new that it is only 111 years old. So this is a very unique combination, the place that we're visiting that is officially called Tel Aviv Jaffa, combination of a very, very old city and a very, very new city. So Tel Aviv Jaffa today, it has this park next to the Mediterranean, next to the beach here. And why are we starting here? You see this rounded thing behind me? It's right over this shoulder of mine. You see this thing? Remember that, because we're going to see the other side of it shortly. But we need to start from here, from overlooking ancient Jaffa and overlooking the Mediterranean. We need to think about September 1866, what the people here in Jaffa saw in that September morning of 1866. So hopefully you can now see a virtual tour of the American German Colony. We are now going back to September 1866 to a town called Johnsport in Maine, in the United States. The people who were living in this town decided to leave everything behind and go on a boat and sail for 42 days across the oceans to get all the way to ancient Jaffa. The person who was responsible for this endeavor, not to say an adventure, was Reverend John George Adams. And he had this idea that if Americans were to come, devoted Christians were to come to the land of Israel and settle in it, more and more Jews would also want to come to the land of Israel and settle in it. And in that way, they will hasten the return of Jesus to life. When they came all the way from America, for 42 days, they sailed through oceans, through the Mediterranean, and they came here. What you see here, you remember behind me, is ancient Jaffa. This is what ancient Jaffa looked like in 1866 when the Americans came here. They saw ancient Jaffa as a very small place closed within a wall. You can see that there's a wall surrounding Jaffa. Almost nothing remained from that ancient wall. So when they came here by boat, I think about the people who were living in Jaffa. They saw this boat coming from, well, basically nowhere. And from that boat, when they arrived on the shore, it was Americans. They're speaking English. It was this foreign thing. I think that for the people living in Jaffa to see those Americans coming here more than 150 years ago, it was like seeing UFOs landing on the beaches of Jaffa. So when these aliens came to Jaffa, of course, the people here in the city were suspicious of them. So they didn't let them settle on the lands that they bought for a good chunk of money. They needed to put up camp outside of Jaffa. It's amazing that we have the photographs from that time because it was the early days of photography. But we actually have a photo of the American camp outside of ancient Jaffa where these people landed. Now, the great misfortune is that just 1 year before they came to the land of Israel, there was a cholera outbreak. There was a plague in Jaffa. And the people who died from the plague were buried outside of the walls, exactly where the Americans put up camp. So no wonder that they also got ill, and some of them didn't survive this unfortunate thing. But after about a month, eventually the authorities, the Ottoman authorities in Jaffa, decide to allow them to settle in the land that they purchased. And this is how the American colony in Jaffa started. So you see here the other side of that stone, that rounded stone that I mentioned is behind me. So this is in commemoration of 157 American Christian lovers of Zion who arrived by sail on the Nelly Chapin, that's how they named the boat, on September 22nd, 1866. Look closely. They also mentioned that they brought with them wooden houses from Jonesport, Maine, to establish the American colony in Jaffa. Now, let's see the wooden houses, right? That's what we came here to see. So when they settled outside of the walls of ancient Jaffa, they put up their houses right where I'm starting the tour at. So this is the American colony in Jaffa. Today, it's as we said, it's kind of a secret place in Tel Aviv because it wasn't in such a good shape until recently. It only became kind of a real estate hit a few years ago when this development called The Village was put in place, and it's trying to mimic the original architecture of the wooden houses of the American colony. Another thing that it wants to kind of recreate is the trees that you see behind me. So you see orange trees. You come by in November, you can pick oranges from the trees here. It's a way to grab a snack here on the way when you're visiting the neighborhood. So why orange trees? Why citrus trees? I want to share my screen again and show you a photograph that was taken from the American colony towards ancient Jaffa. You can see ancient Jaffa in the background. These are orange groves. You can see vast lands that were dedicated outside the walls of ancient Jaffa just for growing oranges. So no wonder that you probably heard of the orange that is also called Jaffa oranges, right? This is where the trademark came from Jaffa, the port city through which all the oranges were exported from the land of Israel to Europe and to America. And to this day, we have this brand, Jaffa Oranges, is still alive as a brand, but there are no orange groves longer in Jaffa. All the orange groves were taken out and real estate was put up instead. So this whole area is developed with houses right now. But we still have Jaffa oranges in the sense that Israel is selling the trademark to other places that grow oranges. So if you see an orange that has the trademark Jaffa, it is most likely from China. So that's how the Jaffa orange became a Chinese orange. Here you can also see a postcard from the time and that is also showing the landscape of ancient Jaffa and the orange groves that you could have seen from the American colony. So we continue to our next place because the American colony that you see behind me, it only lasted for 2 years. Unfortunately. So the Americans that they came here, they put up their wooden houses here outside of the walls of Jaffa. They started up this colony, but there were plagues, there were diseases, there were the land wasn't giving enough food for everybody. There were internal fightings in the American colony, and you remember Reverend John George Adams, the guy who started the whole thing. So he had a problem in the sense that he had this tendency to drink alcohol most times of day. So he wasn't that good of a leader in that sense. You would see him walking around the neighborhood here, kind of tipsy. So he wasn't that good of a leader. And in 2 years, everybody from the American colony left. Where to? Back to America. On their boat, there was another person going back to America. His name was Mark Twain. That's his name that made him famous, of course. So he, the famous American author, he became famous because he traveled the Holy Land in 1868. That's exactly the time that the Americans, who were fed up with everything here in the land of Israel, they come back, and they all come back with him on the same boat to America. So he also writes about their miseries in the land of Israel. So this is Mark Twain, the famous American author. Side note here, he became famous because he did a tour of the Holy Land and then wrote about it, wrote columns to the newspapers in America about it. So if you want to become a famous author like Mark Twain, a famous writer, you come to the Holy Land, you come to Israel, right? That's the only logical conclusion. So I said all the Americans left the American colony, but one. Only one stayed. Let's meet Rolla Floyd. I'm going to show you his picture and also his photo and also the photograph of his family. His family actually is photographed here in Jerusalem because there was another American colony in Jerusalem. So Rolla Floyd stayed in the land of Israel, but not in Jaffa, because he had one thing that was going very good for him, business-wise. He brought in the boat from America not only the wood from which he built his house, we're going to see it in a second, he also brought a stagecoach or a horse-driven carriage. The same year that the Americans are coming to the land of Israel, the Ottoman authorities, the rulers of the land, they pave the way between Jaffa and Jerusalem. And the first wheels on that road were the wheels of the stagecoach that Rolla Floyd brought with him all the way from America. He actually was the first taxi driver in the land of Israel. So when more and more people, mostly Christians, are coming to the land of Israel for pilgrimage to visit the holy sites, so he takes them in his carriage from Jaffa, from the seaport, from where they arrived to the land of Israel, from the gateway to the land of Israel. He takes them to all the holy places, all the holy sites in Jerusalem, in Bethlehem, in Hebron, in Nazareth. So he also becomes the first tour guide in Israel. Now, another quick side note, because this is my forebearer. He was the person who started it all. I'm a tour guide because Rolla Floyd was a tour guide, right? So he was the first. I'm just a later development of Rolla Floyd. An important side note about tour guides in Israel. The Israeli Ministry of Tourism holds surveys from time to time amongst people who visited Israel. Like when they go back home, when they catch them at the Ben Gurion airport before they go on a plane. So they are asked what are the things that they are most happy about, and what are the things that they are least happy about. Now, starting from the least favorite, unfortunately, this is something that Israel needs to get better in. Taxi drivers, they get a very low ranking in favorability amongst tourists coming to Israel. 3.5 out of 5. That's not a very good grade. But what are people most happy about? Or actually, who are people most happy with? Tour guides, of course. 4.5 out of 5. So good thumbs up for Rolla Floyd, the tour guide. Thumbs down, Rolla Floyd, the taxi driver. And now let me take you to his house, because Rolla Floyd's house is one of the only houses that was preserved. And you can see here the wooden structure with the actual wood that was brought here all the way from Johnsport, Maine of the United States. So this is the heart of the American colony. We came through the entrance, the piazza in which we were standing with the orange groves. We went into the neighborhood, and here is the house of Rolla Floyd, preserved with the actual wood that was brought here more than 150 years ago. Amazing, isn't it? Today, it's an Airbnb place. So you can actually sleep in Rolla Floyd's house. Now, on this side, we're going to walk on the main street of the American colony to understand why it is no longer the American colony. It is now the American German colony. So what happened? You remember that the Americans did not stay. I'm showing you another place in the American colony that is actually a good depiction of the transformation of the neighborhood that happened about 2 years after the Americans come in. About 2 years after they come in, we said that most of them lived. They leave behind them empty houses. Who is going to live in these houses? As you might have guessed, Germans. Germans are also coming to the land of Israel around 1868, and they're looking for houses to settle in. And they say, wow, this is a great spot. We already have the infrastructure that the Americans put in place. We might as well take those houses. They're selling it for cheap. So that's how the Templars, these are the German people who came here, again, for Christian theological reasons. They thought that they're going to come to the land of Israel, and by that hasten the return of Jews to the land of Israel and hasten the return of Jesus to life. So they buy the houses from the Americans. And you can see the transformation of the neighborhood from wooden houses. This is a house that is half wood. This is the original wooden house of the American family that lived here. Wentworth, that's the name. So the Wentworth family, that was their house. And then it was bought by a family, a German family called Frank. So the family Frank added another section to the house that was made out of stone. So just like the tale about the three little piggies, the Americans built their houses with wood. Maybe that's why they didn't last much. And the Templars built their houses, or developed the older houses, in stone. So that's how the Wentworth family house is becoming the Frank family house. Today, it's a museum that is called the Main Friendship House. It is a museum dedicated to the history of the American colony. The 2 years that they were here, they deserved to get this museum for them, right? So the Germans come here, the Templars come in, and they have much more success. Let me show you another part of the neighborhood. So we were standing with our faces towards the main friendship house, and we turned our back to the other way, and we saw this. What is behind me now are two houses that were recently redeveloped or refurbished. You can see that that in Tel Aviv in recent years, there's a lot of money going into preservation of old houses. So these houses, the house of the family Friedel and the house of the family Breisch, two Templar families that settled here, you can see again kind of a combination of wooden terraces and a stone house. This is the development of the neighborhood from American to German, from wood to stone. And this whole thing has become a luxury apartment building in the middle of the American-German colony. And you can see that this photo, now that I see, is quite recent, because this guy behind me is wearing a face mask. So this is a very recent photograph. So this is the heart of the German-American colony, not to say the cross. What do I mean by that? The heart of the neighborhood, the heart of the colony, is actually the intersection of two streets. Why is that? Because the sign of a cross. They were Christian believers, both the Americans and later the Germans. So the neighborhood was in the shape of a cross. We're standing on the middle of the cross. By the way, not far from here, in later years, Jewish immigrants to the land of Israel would put up a new neighborhood here in the vicinity of Jaffa, in the vicinity of Tel Aviv later on. It is called Neve Sha'anan, and it was in the shape of a menorah. So you can see that each group of believers has their own symbol. Okay, some more interesting things that you can see in the neighborhood. So you saw behind the main friendship house, there's a cool church behind me. This is one of the only Gothic buildings in the land of Israel. This is an interesting story about the Templars. They believed that the actual temple should be in the hearts of the believers, and there shouldn't be like a church for the believers, like a temple, a place that is supposed to be holy. So they didn't put up a church, but later generations of Templars living in this colony, they decided that they needed a church. They decided that they needed a place to worship God. So they put up this church for them. And it was supposed to be inaugurated with the visit of the German emperor to the land of Israel in 1898. It was a very important visit. It would be like the visit of, a few years ago, we had a visit from Prince William, who came to visit the state of Israel on an official visit. It was the first member of the royal family to visit Israel in 72 years. So it was a very special visit for people, and people were kind of standing in the street just to get a glimpse of Prince William. So think about that, multiplied by 1,000, because the German emperor coming to visit the land of Israel, this was an amazing thing. And churches were built for that occasion. Unfortunately, it seems that even Germans can be sometime late. And the ceremony for the inauguration of the church was a few days late, and that's why the emperor was not able to attend. But it did keep in touch with the believers here in the German colony here, so they were friends altogether. I see that I have some questions in the chat. So, Alan, you wrote to me privately. What are the names of the two streets? So it is Auerbach Street, the street that we're walking on, and the one that is crossing it is Ber Hoffman. The streets were named after Jews who had a German background, and they were both writers that were fairly famous in culture. Larry, you write that the Templars had their own style of cross. That's true, but it is very complicated to create that in the form of the street. So maybe that's the reason that they put it. And another reason is just that they just keep the cross from the Americans. Sure thing, Halling. Is this related to the Templar buildings near Sarona Market? Wow, it's a good thing you ask, Marjorie. Of course, the Templars, when they settled in the land of Israel, they had more kids because, people live and they have kids. So they need to put up new neighborhoods. There was another neighborhood very close to where we're standing right now. It was called Valhalla. And there was another new colony further away from Jaffa and further away from Tel Aviv, but still in the vicinity of this area, that was called Sarona. And that German colony, Sarona, is now famous for the Templar buildings that are still there, and they have the Sarona Market there, which is a big food market, which is very cool to visit. So this is another connection to places that you might know here in Tel Aviv. So the Germans, as you know, were very industrious. They were not only going to church here, they were not only growing oranges. I'm showing you another face of the church. Again, one of the only Gothic buildings to be built in the land of Israel. And we Israelis go to Europe to see these kinds of buildings in European cities, Most Tel Avivians don't know that they have that in their backyard. So some more things that the Germans are doing here, apart from growing oranges, they also go into the industry of this area. They bring a lot of technology from Europe, which is very helpful in creating industry in the land of Israel in the latter half of the 19th century. But they also want to have fun from time to time. So on this side of mine, there is now a small park. This used to be the tennis ground, the tennis court for the German Templars who lived in this neighborhood. So you see, the Germans also needed to have fun from time to time. So this was the tennis court of the American German colony. You see here the Templars, they were playing tennis at the time. So it's amazing to see. Let me see if I can talk to them. What are you saying, guys? What's the score? They stay mute. Okay, so these are the Templars that you can. So you can see the Templars here. They're playing tennis at the time, and I also wanted to mention some more stuff that they do here in the neighborhood. So we said that we have this heart of the neighborhood that is actually in the shape of a cross. There's one corner with the tennis court. There is now kind of a park. The houses that we mentioned earlier, the Friedelbreich houses, and we also have the main Friendship House that used to be the Frank, formerly Wentworth family house. And there's one more corner that we need to look at to finish, to see all the buildings in the heart of the neighborhood. And that is this building. So you see it's kind of big. It's 3 stories high. Very unusual for the neighborhood, and this is today a guest house for Christian pilgrims. It is called the Beit Immanuel guest house of the Christian people who come here, and what this used to be something that was also connected to what the German people did here. They were farmers, there were industry people, there were tennis players, and there were also people in the German colony that were into tourism. So you see here a postcard of this guest house when it was a hotel, one of the first hotels in the area. It was called Hotel du Parc. Hotel du Parc. It was opened up thanks to a Russian baron who was a Protestant, and he came to Jaffa following health recommendation by his doctor because he was told to go to a better, kind of more, kind of a hotter climate. So this Russian baron came to the land of Israel and he opened up this hotel that was called Hotel du Parc. Why it was called Hotel du Parc? Because in French it's the Park Hotel, and behind it there was a small park, one of the first planned parks in the land of Israel, and it was also a kind of a mini zoo at the time. It also had monkeys and parrots, so people from all around the area came to visit that park because it was so unique to see. And you remember the German emperor that came to visit the land of Israel in 1898? So when he visited the land of Israel, he wanted to be close to people who also spoke German, evidently. So he stayed in the German colony in this hotel. Next to this hotel, there is another building. You can also see it in this postcard. Let's go and visit it. It is the hotel in which the people who came along with the emperor, this is where they slept the night that they stayed here in Jaffa. Rita is asking, is there a museum in one of these buildings? So yeah, the main Friendship House is now a museum that is dedicated to the history of the Americans who settled here, and you can schedule a visit to the main Friendship House. You can log on to their website and see the phone number and the email address, and you can contact them to visit. So we said that there's one hotel in the German colony that is called the Du Parc Hotel, and there's another one right here that is called the Jerusalem Hotel. So you can see that the German colony was a touristic hit already in 1870s land of Israel. This hotel was also kind of marketing itself as a place for pilgrims. So I'm going to show you another postcard. It was ran by a Templar guy called Hardeg, and he was also given the honor of being the American consul to Jaffa. So that's why there is an American flag on the top of the Jerusalem Hotel that is ran by a German person called Hardeg. And you can also see how he was marketing the Jerusalem Hotel, both in German and in English. Evangelical cleanliness, biblical comfort. So people who were coming to the land of Israel for, well, biblical reasons. They wanted to stay in a biblical place, offering biblical comfort. So no wonder that the rooms were given names by characters in the Bible. So 12 rooms were given names by the tribes of Israel, and another set of 12 rooms were given names in accordance with the followers of Jesus. There's a very fancy word for 12 followers of Jesus. You'll have to remind me. Apostles, is that right? Yeah, I see people nodding. Now we've visited another site in the German colony. I want to transport us back to the heart of the neighborhood, to the cross of the neighborhood, and you can see here a kind of a day-to-day experience that you could have seen in the middle of the neighborhood. So behind me now is the Friedelbreich houses. In front of me is the Frank family house, what is now the main friendship house, and over there, the other corner, this is the Dupont Hotel next to the Jerusalem Hotel. And this behind me is a donkey, and behind that is the tennis court. And you can see that people were coming in every morning, and they were ready to give a beautiful ride for the tourists who stayed in the to grab tourists from the hotels here and give them a ride through the important sites in the land of Israel. Now, let's go down a notch. We're going down what is now called Auerbach Street. We're going down, so we're passing next to the Du Parc Hotel, we're passing next to the Jerusalem Hotel, and we're getting to this new place behind me. So again, at the top is the Du Parc Hotel, today the Bet Emmanuel Guest House, and this is the Jerusalem Hotel, reopened about a year ago as the Driscoll Hotel. So you can visit it, and you can stay in the hotel that that was publicized 100 and something years ago as having evangelical cleanliness. And this place behind me, Norton, is actually a good place. The Norton House is a good place to finish our visits to the German American colony, because Mr. Norton, who was one of the Americans who came here, following the Reverend John George Adams, he was one of the first people to kind of say, oh, I think that we have a problem. So he led the group of Americans back to America, and was also responsible for selling the houses that stayed here for the German Templars. This house was one of the first houses in the American colony to be renewed, and it was it also turned into kind of another section of the Driscoll Hotel, the yellow hotel that you see here. So these are rooms in the hotel itself, and here there are villas that you can stay here. I don't get any percentages. It's just cool places that you can visit if you want to stay in. Okay, so this was another spot in the American-German neighborhood. I think that there was one more thing that I wanted to share with you. And let me check. There you go. So overlooking the entirety of the German colony, you can see here the yellow hotel behind me. This is the Jerusalem Hotel, and also the Du Parc Hotel, and also the Norton House behind me, and also some of the orange groves in the background. And you can see the tower of the church, the bell tower of the church, kind of peeking behind it, and also the Wentworth turned into Frank family house, and also the Friedelbreich house, and also the tennis court right next to this house. So this is overlooking the entire neighborhood that we saw. A very interesting story about the Christians who came here at the end, in the middle and the end of the 19th century. They were sure that they were going to bring redemption to the world, and on the way they're going to redeem themselves. The end of the story is that the Templars stayed here for 3 generations, and then they were expelled by the British during the Second World War. During the Second World War, the Germans were fighting the British, of course, so they were considered enemy residents. So they were expelled. They were taken all the way to Australia, and their houses were taken by the British government. When the State of Israel was established, most of the houses that were in British possession were given to the State of Israel. And this doesn't end here. After the State of Israel started to use those buildings, it also went into negotiations with the government of Western Germany about the reparations agreement following the Holocaust. And in the end, to that document, that agreement between the Israeli government and the Western Germany government, they decided to reduce the worth of the houses, the German houses, from how much money is going to be given from West Germany to the State of Israel. Amazing to see that that such ancient history has also came all the way up to the reparations agreement in the 1950s.